my heart with the whispers of truth, to live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge, on the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
Hello, and good morning, and welcome to Growing Edge Live. I'm Allie Benjamin, and it is my great joy to be here today. We are going to have another amazing, deep conversation with a soul-centered being, my mentor and teacher, Linda Frazee, and we're going to meet her in just a while. And so I'm so glad that you're here today, whether you're watching live here on the New Thought Media Network, or whether you're watching this as a replay. I'm so glad that you're here. I know that what we have to offer and share today is going to touch you in a particular way, lift your spirits, give you some insights, help you with wherever you are on your path to have a more rich and full and conscious life. So we are live. We've got some people that are joining us. There's the notary coach. Hello, Bill. Good to see that you're here. And we are really all about bringing to people's awareness people that are sharing their time, their talent, their energies in support of helping others find a richer, more meaningful life. And so you're going to meet people throughout the coming months from all walks of life that have a beautiful piece to share with us to really help us to see what an amazing world we live in and what a rich, colorful rainbow spectrum of humanity we're playing with here on this earth playground. So welcome. I'm glad you're here. And I always start the show with a segment that I call Ask Allie. And today I have a question that I thought was really fun. And this comes from AJ. And AJ says, my sister has been encouraging me to work on myself. And I don't know if I want to, based on what I've seen her go through. She sometimes seems more unhappy than usual. Why is it important to work on spiritual development or study spirituality? And where do I start? So isn't that true? Haven't you noticed, if you're on a spiritual path or you've witnessed someone dive into personal development, have you noticed that there can be periods of ups and downs, highs and lows? And that's how it goes. And that it can be a bit of a rocky road as you start to explore your inner workings. You explore who you really are and why you're here and what you're going to do about that. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, as one of my friends just mentioned. It can be troubling. It can bring up, put some light on some dark corners that maybe we haven't explored. But the good news is it's worth it, because what's buried, what we're not addressing, what we're not looking at, it has a way of sort of seeping into our everyday experience, especially our relationships. Someone said, what's buried alive stays alive. And it does. So if there's issues, self-worth issues, if there's some self-loathing issues, or if there's people that you haven't forgiven, if there's things that happened in the past that are really, really difficult to think about or look at, that can be hard to shine the light of awareness on. And so it's worth it. It's worth doing it. Why? Because once we can shine the light of awareness, once we can see what some of our unconscious patterns are, and we start to realize that we all have this. It's not just us. So many people are struggling with things that they don't want to talk about, that they're ashamed of or embarrassed about. But once we get help, maybe it's therapy, Maybe it's taking a course or a class or starting meditation, something like that. We start to see that there can be a gentle healing or a gentle discovery and a gentle release that occurs that helps us to move into a life that is so much more relaxed and centered and peaceful. Relationships, conversations seem to flow in a more natural and organic way. And it takes work. It takes work. And so I definitely think it's worth it. I definitely think it can be challenging. So it's one of those both and things. It's difficult, but it's definitely worth doing. I know for me, I started in my late 20s, and my life had become unmanageable, and I was going through some difficulties, a very challenging divorce. And my first step onto my spiritual path, so I guess this is kind of addressing that where do you start piece. My first step was finding the Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life. And then that led me to an Al-Anon meeting, because my particular messy life consisted of living with an active alcoholic drug addict. And so it was very, very challenging. And so I found Al-Anon, which is for friends and families of people that are addicted to substances. And through my work with Al-Anon, I started to come out of my shell. I started to see that I wasn't alone. And I started to start learning the importance of self-discovery and building self-awareness and seeing how I had a role in the dysfunction of my relationships. And so that led me down a path that's been my whole life's path, really, of reading spiritual books, self-empowerment books, self-development books. It led me to find a spiritual community within the New Thought movement. And that was a center for spiritual living in San Diego. That's where I was living at the time. And that leads to another important part of what's helpful when we're on this sometimes challenging path of self-discovery is finding people that can support you, a community, a loving, caring community that can support you with friendships and with resources that will help you to stay feeling connected to yourself. And having that support was very important and very empowering. It actually opened me up to so much and helped me to see the rich banquet table of options that are out there for people like me and people like you that are interested in personal development and spirituality. And so that really led me to become a science of mind practitioner and then a minister. And it's really been a beautiful life and has led to a lot of breakthroughs. I think one of the biggest parts of spiritual awakening and being on the path to self-development is learning about self-forgiveness and forgiveness in general. And there's so many ways that you can be supported with that. Like I said, through therapy, through finding a science of mind practitioner, or being a part of a women's group or men's group or just a spiritual group in general. And that helps with being able to soften, open the heart, and be willing to let go of some of those more challenging resentments maybe, or unforgiveness that hold us back from truly opening up and having a rich, full life. And currently I'm here in Denver, Colorado, and I'm just on the tail end of an amazing conference, a deep dive immersion program into becoming an Enneagram teacher and coach. And so I'm here with a small group of equally inspired and committed seekers and teachers and leaders that are interested in understanding the human condition. And so my guest today, which we'll get to in a moment, is my teacher, and we'll be able to hear from her directly on how using a tool like the Enneagram can be so powerful in understanding who we are as individuals and who other people are based on their own unique upbringing, conditioning, and the way they are at the core of their soul. And so it's all about self-discovery and self-awareness. And yes, AJ, it can be a rocky road. And sometimes we can look at our friends and family that are on that spiritual path and go, oh my gosh, that seems to be a challenging thing. Why would anyone want to do that? And all I have to say is it's worth it. If you want to fall in love with life, and if you want to fall in love with yourself, the path of self-development and the spiritual path can be one of extreme joy and extreme opening to a deeper walk with the universe, or a deeper walk with God. And so thanks, AJ, for the question. And if anyone else has questions that they would like to submit, please do so. You can do that in the chat, or you can email me at growingedgelive@gmail.com. And so now we're going to segue into my conversation today with my mentor, my therapist, my friend, Linda Frazee. And Linda is an international workshop leader, professional life coach, and co-author of the book Full Heart, Satisfied Belly. She is a certified Enneagram teacher and has been using the Enneagram as a primary tool in her work with others for the last 30 years. She was a founding mother of the Arizona Enneagram Association. Linda works with individuals, businesses, and the government to enhance life and increase productivity. Her professional training is in transpersonal psychology and imagery. She has been in private practice in Colorado, Maryland, and currently in Phoenix, Arizona. In addition, she is a metaphysician, an active member of Centers for Spiritual Living. She conducts body, mind, spirit workshops around the U.S. and facilitates women's groups. She's appeared on TV, podcasts, and frequently been a guest on national radio. So welcome to Linda, my dear friend. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you here today.
Thank you, Allie. This is a wonderful show, and you're doing such a great job. It's lovely to see you at work.
Thank you. So tell us a little bit about you. What's been your journey? How did you end up being this amazing Enneagram coach, speaker, had such a great impact in so many areas of life? How did you get from birth to here in the next 2 minutes? No, I'm just kidding.
Right. Yes, well, I was gonna say, how many hours do we have here? Okay, but well, I knew you were going to ask that question, so I thought about it a little bit. And one of the things that I don't customarily talk about in on TV or on radio is the fact that I had a head start with my family. I was born and raised in a small little town in Colorado named Salida, Colorado, and population 5,000. I think it has 6,000 now, all these many years later. But my father was a writer and my mother was an artist. And my mother wasn't a famous artist by any means. My father was semi-famous. He wrote Westerns, and he also wrote for Disney. So he wrote a lot of the High Chaparral and Bonanza and Lassie and things like that I watched on TV. I had the script in my hand of Zorro the first time. He wrote the television script for Zorro. And so I sat on the floor of the house, and the TV was about as big as my laptop now. But anyway, and watched now this one goes to left, stage right. Now they're on the horse, whatever. So I didn't know anything different about that. But the other thing that's important about this, even though my parents were not religious or even, well, they were spiritual in their own way, in nature, they would say. My mother was tremendously psychic. And it comes down the long line. And one of the traditional stories was that my father was coming home from the World War II, but she didn't know when. All she knew was the war had ended. So she was having lunch with her friend, and she had my brother with her, who was like 4 years old. And suddenly she said, "Oh, Steve's getting off the train. I got to go down and meet him. Will you take care of my son?" And her friend said, "Well, how did you know that?" And she said, "Well, I just know it." She said, "Well, that's ridiculous. I mean, how would you know that he's coming?" She said, "He's coming." And of course, he had the intention of surprising her. So she went down and they got off the train. So that was, I could go on about many stories. But so the reason I bring that up, they taught us my brother and I, to communicate telepathically, so that like if we were out playing, because in those days you could just go out and play all day, and they'd say it's time for lunch, and we'd come home. My father was downtown and my mother needed bread. She just sent him a message: "I need bread." And he'd bring it home and he'd say, "I got the message about the bread." And they had to caution us, "Look, you can't talk to everybody about this, because a lot of people will think that this is very strange." So it wasn't like they sat us down and gave us lessons. They demonstrated it was a way of life. So I bring that up because my parents didn't go to any kind of church at all. They both had some negative experiences with traditional churches. But I knew more than I should know at a very young age. And I would say by the time I was 8, I had surpassed them in my abilities on that level, intuitive, we could just call it your intuitive nature. And I do think that that's helped me tremendously in my career. So I'll skip forward many years. And now had been married in a bad marriage, got out of that, was in a single mother. And my oldest daughter was about 15. And I had raised them somewhat Catholic, somewhat. I wasn't tremendously devout, but I taught catechism. My oldest daughter, Michelle, went to catechism, and she got kicked out of catechism for asking too many questions. So we moved frequently because I was also a real estate investor. So she said, we read some metaphysical books, and she said, "Gee, this is great. Do you think there's a church like that?" And I said, "Oh, no, there's no church like that. I've never heard of such a thing." So I was teaching a real estate class about, taking risks. And I was in the midst of it. And this fellow said to me, and this was in Denver. And he said, "There's a church here that teaches the same thing." I said, "Oh, really? What's it called?" And he said, "Science of Mind." And I thought, oh boy, of course, immediately I thought it was Scientology. And then I said, "Where is it?" And he told me, and the Science of Mind Church in Denver at that time, and now they have two, they have another one that's much bigger, is a rounded dome. And I'd driven by that, and I'm going, oh boy. And he said, "You've been teaching us to take risks all day. I think it's time you took a risk. I think you should go." And he said, "And I'll meet you there." So it wasn't like an invitation. So I went home and I said to my daughter, who was 15, "I've got to go to this crazy church. For all I know, they roll on the floor." I said, "It's that wild round thing that you've seen if you're driving by. And so I've got to show up. You want to go?" And she said, "Can I drive the Mercedes?" That was the most important thing, because she was having a marriage permit. And I said, "Sure." So she came along and we went and we got in the back door. I met the guy, shook his hand, got in just as close as we could to the get out of there, because I figured if anything got really weird, we could escape. And they turned off the lights and they started singing "We're All Children of the Universe." And we started crying, both of us. And that's how we found it. And so I've told that story a couple of times. One man said, "Boy, we ought to send that fellow a thank you note." But in any case, Michelle had little ponytails on either side. She was 15 years old. She marched right down the front and said, "How does a person take classes here?"
Wow.
And that was the beginning. Now, she went ahead and took classes and became a practitioner. She was the youngest minister in the movement of Centers for Spiritual Living, which was it's called the Science of Mind. At the time, she certainly isn't anymore. And she ended up being the head minister of Mile High, sharing that position with another fellow. And she's been a minister now for 32 years. So
Wow. Well, and we went to Mile High Church yesterday together, and it's been a dream of mine to go
mhm,
and to be there with you, the mother of the the lead minister or the co-leader of the Mile High Center for Spiritual Living. Was just such a thrill to see Michelle up there, to be sitting with you, and to be in that atmosphere of oneness, of that feeling that you get when you go into a New Thought church, whether it's a Unity or a CSL or one of the independent,
right,
there's that familiar I'm home
right.
feeling. Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people haven't seen really large churches. So I know for CSL, they've had some conventions. I've been to a few, not in the most recent 5 years. And some people have just small churches. I mean, the majority of Science Mind churches are, whatever brand they come from with that philosophy, are relatively small. And so to come into a situation where you have 1,500 people 3 times a day on Sundays normally, and that can bring in speakers like Chopra and Oprah Winfrey and all of that, it's an amazing sort of thing.
It is. It's phenomenal, and it was a wonderful experience.
So Michelle, of course, took that route of going right up the spiritual, climbed the spiritual ladder, I guess you'd say, in her success. And what I did is I had this background in transpersonal psychology, but I felt like I had to support my 3 children, and I had no idea how I was going to do that. So I just didn't hang out a shingle right away. But I started teaching the principles that I knew and were working for me. And here is another interesting thing that happened. I was selling real estate, and that was my primary thing. I was also doing an internship for my transpersonal psychology, but that was separate. And I had an opportunity, and I had been successful in real estate. And so this one particular month, I was a salesperson of the month and also lister of the month, and so the office I was in was primarily all men. And there was a common theme with them about alcohol. So they all stopped about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and they had a complete bar in the basement of this place, and they would go drink, which was fine with me because I didn't drink that much, and I'd stay upstairs on the floor and get all the calls. So I started making a lot more money than they did. But this one month I was again lister and salesman of the month, and it looked really good, and they had announced it and all of this. And suddenly things started to fall. Things started to fall down. It wasn't going well. Somebody came in with a dread disease. I had sold their house. I sold another house. It was a chain of things that I'd sold. The man had Guillain-Barré disease. He was in the hospital. I had to go in and have him sign while he could still write. So we went and did that, and somebody else decided they wanted to get divorced. And when I would tell this story, when I was on the speaking circuit, I'd say, I tried to counsel them to stay together because their loan was approved, but they didn't want to do it. So I lost that. So anyway, the whole thing went down. So I went home and I thought, okay, I have had an issue with money in my life before. This is part of my responsibility. Now, if I hadn't gotten into Science of Mind and been able to get into that philosophy at the level that I had taken a lot of classes at that point, I might not have gotten that. So I credit a lot of that coming from that spiritual source. So I went home, and by that time I was doing imagery with groups a lot. So I put myself into imagery. And I remembered something that I had no conscious memory at all. And that was that when I lived in Salida, Colorado, which was cold. It's cold. It's 7,200 feet high. I was cold my whole life there. And I had an opportunity to go to Hollywood with my dad. And I saw the mansions and the swimming pools and the green grass and the ocean. And that's where I wanted to go. And he kept saying no. But in this one particular thing, I remembered the phone rang, one phone in the living room, and you had a little black phone with a dial on it. You had to pick it up. So I picked it up. It was Paramount Pictures calling. And so I called my father to the phone, and I stood right near him. I think I was about 7. And because I'm thinking, this is it now, finally, he's going to agree to go to Hollywood and we can live in that wonderful place. And he's going, no, no, no. I mean, the reality was he was not agreeing to anything. And then he finally hung up. And I said, are we going to Hollywood? And he said, no. You know what happens to famous people's children in Hollywood? They get kidnapped. And he walked away. And I took that in like, that's the truth. I mean, it was like, because it was such a desire of mine, and it just was like it burst a balloon. And somehow I got that also, that too much money is dangerous. So I would do bizarre things with my money. I mean, I would loan my ex-husband money, which was just foolish. I'd been married to him for 14 years. Everybody knew he wasn't good with money, you know. And I bought many houses. I was flipping houses before for fun, before it was called flipping houses. So anyway, I got that, and I changed that in that moment. I really went to that little girl in my own imagery and held her and said, look, that's not really true. That's his fear. That's not yours. And so from that moment on, within another couple of weeks, I was again lister and salesperson of the month. Mm-hmm. And so my broker, who was, as I said, he was probably an alcoholic. I don't really know because I didn't follow him around all the time. But again, he was a big drinker and thought I was pretty weird. He often say, I don't get you. I don't know. You're pretty weird. And I said, I am, you're right. So anyway, we set at a sales meeting. Well, tell me now, Frazee, I've never seen anything like this. It's like you were snake bitten and you bounce right back up. How did you do it? And I said, you don't want to know. You don't want to know. And he said, no, I do. Just tell me. Well, I told him. And he said, I challenge you to improve the production of this office with your techniques. And I said, you're on. Now, when I've told that on a stage too, I've said, obviously I wasn't healed because I didn't ask for money. So, but anyway, I said yes. So I started, they gave me the 5 people who were the lowest producing. And in this company, it was a premier one in Denver. And you had to make a certain amount of money or you got kicked out. I mean, it wasn't just, it didn't work out of the house the way that people do now. And you couldn't just make a little bit or have 1 or 2 sales a year. You had to really stay at a certain level. Well, there was one little guy named Don, sweet little guy who I thought was quite old. He probably was nowhere near the age I am now. So, he looked like a little grandpa. And we were in these bullpens. So when a new person would come in, they'd walk in and they'd see all of the agents. Well, if they were a young couple who had no money, they'd had 3 or 4 bankruptcies, they had 5 kids, they hardly had work, they would go immediately to Don because he just looked like he would be this nice guy who would take them under his wings, which he did. So Don was working his tail off and he wasn't making much money. So he was one that was assigned to me, among others. And what happened for Don is he got that the subconscious message he was operating on was from his mother. Don't ask for very much because that way you won't be disappointed.
Mm. Wow.
So I worked with him in shifting that and he went crazy. He did so much money and did so well that he was able to retire in about 5 years. And in the meantime, he came to me and he said, okay, well, I've got to back up a little bit. So I was just doing this to prove to my broker that I could help with my techniques, but I didn't have any regular sign with it. I was just doing it as it came up. And so finally, somebody came to me. I would just say, okay, I can do it on Thursday next week. So one of those group came to me and said, we really need to get this more regular because we want to make sure we're there. And so how would it be if I set it up and I did all this? And I said, that'd be great. And so this person kind of handled it, managed it. So we did that. So pretty soon my broker came to me and said, I think that you ought to go down to the Colorado Real Estate Association because, they're always looking for speakers. And I think this is something unique. This was about 1983, maybe 84 at the most. And so I did. So they invited me down. They paid for me to go in and do a class for them. So then they asked me to appear at the Broadmoor in Colorado, which at that time was the premier big Colorado Sales Association meeting. And people came Excaliburs and wore big hats. It was really a first class kind of big deal. So there I went down and I told them by that time I named my company because little Dawn came to me and said, this is going to be a big thing. You need to name this company. And I said, I don't have time to do that. I mean, I'm selling real estate. He said, well, if I put down a bunch of names, will you look at it? I said, yeah. So he came in and he'd listed in 2 lines all the names he could think of that would apply. So I circled positive imagery. He went down and recorded it with the state of Colorado.
Wow. I'm going to jump in for a moment?
Yes.
I want to talk more about this, but we're going to take a really short break here at the New Thought Media Network. And so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay.
New Thought Media Network is on the rise. We're looking to grow with you. Do you have technical media experience or perhaps a desire to learn? Are you willing to volunteer your precious time and attention? We share this message to benefit all. If you possess a computer with a camera and a microphone, we will share our knowledge with you. Behind the scenes or being the star, let us bless our one. Contact us at info@ntmedia.org. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors and donors, including the Hefferland Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown Atlanta, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, and all of our individual donors and sponsors. Thank you for being a part of the New Thought Media Network. Please come be you.
Free my mind, open my heart with the whispers of truth. To live a conscious life, to live a conscious life on the growing edge. On the growing edge.
And now, here's Allie.
All right, we're back. And I love hearing about your story at your real estate company and Don and how he started to thrive through the introduction of these principles and the practice of imagery, and then helping, like, harnessing that energy to help you come up with a name for your company, your business. What I'm hearing is a real interweaving of these spiritual principles into everyday life, into sort of mainstream. And I think that is such a wonderful thing that many of us in this movement are able to do, to speak to the general public about these wonderful things we learn in our centers, in our churches, in our communities. So it's not just, for those times when we're, in a spiritual setting, it's for our life, and to be able to help someone move through blockages and challenges to live a more, abundant, prosperous, joyful life must be extremely rewarding.
It is rewarding. How one of the things what people often do when they get on a plane, I don't think I'm the only one by far that does this, to say, well, if the plane went down today and this was my last day, have I done what I came here to do? And I would say for the last 20 or even maybe 25 years, the answer for me has been yes. And I want to point out something. I want to finish that story a little bit and then come back to something that I think is really appropriate when you talk about being in the civilized world that isn't really aware of new thought ideas. When I went to the Broadmoor and I did that positive imagery, and again, this is early. This is in the 80s, and there wasn't any of this around. It wasn't going on. I think by that time I'd started making tapes, cassette tapes, of course, because that's what we had in those days, selling little boxes of tapes. Well, anyway, that sent me out into Colorado, to the state of Colorado. And so I started doing workshops all over. By that time, I was still selling real estate. So I hired someone, a new realtor who came in. And what happened with her is she would do all the background things for me. And I would interview the people, and she would find the houses, and I would do the contracts, because by that time I knew this was going to be my business. So then from there, I was asked by the National Association of Realtors to go to Hawaii and appear there. And that launched me into the into the whole United States. So that was in 18 months from the time that my broker said to me, I challenge you to increase the production of this company. I was full-fledged a consultant and on the speaker circuit. So, and then I was picked up by all kinds of other industries. I did a lot of real estate and title work and mortgage companies, but eventually I was picked up by many others. And so I was on the speaking circuit for about 12 years. So, beautiful. But the thing that I want to mention about that and what that ties into was my intuition. And I wasn't sitting around meditating and trying to figure out where to go. I just was in the right place at the right time. And so I think that if we actualize that part of us inside of us, this silent, quiet part that doesn't often get a lot of praise, or a lot of people work on it, try to get it up, it's there if you just honor it. And I acknowledge that I had a head start because of my background, but I didn't know. People come to me all the time and say, how do I do what you did? And now there's all these ideas. I got to have this tremendous website, and I've got to have the tremendous social presence, and I agree that in this day and age that's important. I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but it's still about who you know, and it's about being in touch with yourself to know that when you see somebody, that's the right person to go toward, or the connection that you make, because it's hard to do this just with technology. It's hard to be a success with just technology. It really is about who you know. Still to this day. And even getting a job is that way. I have a lot of people who I work with who are trying to break into a new industry or get a new job. And, of course, LinkedIn helps because they can go on there and find people that know them and all of that. I'm not saying anything's wrong with those, but still, it's the people that you know. It's the people. Yeah. And when you think about it, if you're a traditional business of any kind, or non-traditional as far as that goes, you have a position open. In this day and age, you get 600 resumes. Who has time to go to 600 resumes? So very often what someone will do, the owner of the company or the CEO, the head will say, who knows somebody that's reliable that needs a job? And that's how you find jobs. Right. It's still, even with all this technology, is a lot about who you know. But before you know who you know out there, you got to know who you are in here.
Exactly. And that's a good sort of lead into a question I have for you, which is, you're teaching me about the Enneagram, which is an amazing tool. And so as you have also, probably at the same time as you've been, in the business world and developing as a speaker and helping thousands of people in the real estate world, how does the Enneagram come in? How have you found the Enneagram to be helpful for people in the business world and in the more spiritual communities, particularly with this thing that you're helping us understand, which is the importance of knowing about intuition.
Right. Well,
So can you tell us about the Enneagram just a little bit? Because some of us don't even know what it is.
Well, and right now it's almost a buzzword, which is hysterical to me, because 30 years ago when I started teaching it, nobody even had heard of it, and they were rather suspicious about it. Now it's everywhere. It's ENNEAGRAM is the way it's spelled. And it simply means, it's Greek, a Greek word for a 9-pointed graph. That's all that the Enneagram means. So, I mean, that's a word. And I bring that up because people who are not New Thought may think that it's Wiccan or some odd thing, and it's not at all. And what it is a system of understanding yourself, a deep system. I say the Enneagram is for people who want to take a deep dive. Now, it can be used superficially, like the Myers-Briggs or the DISC or those things that I was training out when I was on the speaking circuit. But it really has its roots down into your essence, which is ultimately what it's all about. So we get blocked. I like to say that your personality strangles your essence. Those of you who are New Thought people, you want to get to that essence. We know what essence is. Everybody has a moment where you see a rainbow, where you're in nature, when you watch babies, puppies, kittens, whatever, and you feel the wholeness of life in your own way. And you are the best version of yourself when you're in your essence. Sometimes that's in imagery. Sometimes that's in meditation. So everybody has a way of being in essence, but it gets blocked by our self-esteem about how we think we should be. So our self-image, it gets blocked by our defenses. It gets blocked by what we project about everybody. It gets blocked if we're not really willing to be who we really are. And there are 9 types on the Enneagram, not any one better than another. And each one does it differently. One of the things I love about it is the Enneagram honors 3 centers of intelligence: in our head, in our heart, and in our belly. We all have all three, but we have a default system. We go to one more often than another, and then we develop that one. So the people who have more of their personality in the head center are really, they may be smarter than everybody else. They may not be, but they spend a lot of time in their head thinking about what's going to happen next. It's all about security and safety. It's about getting it right so that you'll be safe. And so they're up here a lot, and oftentimes not so much in their hearts. The heart people can be so emotional and so in touch, and maybe they feel their intuition there. And so they're, helping others all the time. This is a large segment of our population. Well, let me go back. If you're a head center, don't we want them as accountants? Don't we want them as your banker? Don't we want the people who fix your cars? Don't we want the people who, are flying your planes? I mean, again, we all have a head, a heart, and a belly. But if there's going to be somebody that's going to spend a lot of time there to make sure things are safe, we need people like that. We want them to make sure that engineers that make sure our bridges are strong. And then the heart people are very often the people who are serving others, the doctors, a good doctor, therapists, coaches, the coaches for Little League, the people who are really caring about people and handling their wounds, whether they're physical or emotional or spiritual. And so we have all of those kind of people. And then we have the people in the body instinct, who are the ones who are making sure things get done right, and that they get things that's not safe, and calling people out and saying that's not okay, that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. And so we have that. Well, don't we all do all of that? Yes, but we all do our own little version of it. And when you find your type on the Enneagram, the particular place that you lead from, we all have all of this within us, but we lead with one of these. I believe it's genetically, there's a genetic predisposition that you take into your family of origin with you at birth. And if that's a very healthy family, you flourish and you're shown your best, and your healthy family will be able to notice those things you don't do so well, and encourage you to find ways that you can grow in that, and with those kind of problems. But if it's dysfunctional in any way, there's a lot of adaptive behavior. And so then you go to this lower level of your fixation. It's called an Enneagram language, and then that grows. So for a 1, that might be, I have to have it right. It's got to be right all the time. And it's got to be, I'm a perfectionist if I'm a 1, and that's the way it's supposed to be, as an example. And so if that grows, and if that's even encouraged in the family, like you have one parents, they'd say, no, you've got to clean up your plate. You've got to there can't be any crumbs on the floor. There can't be anything like this. And so all of your energy gets into that instead of the beauty of just the divine perfection. So then you go to church, you're trying to get into the divine perfection, but this is like saying, but it's not right. The colors aren't right. The music is off a little bit. It's too hot in here. It's too cold. And you get all caught up in that, and you're unable to be in that at your deepest level.
Wow. I can see how knowing your type and understanding some of these things, might you call them blind spots or patterns that keep you, struggling, that sort of put a filter over your experience so that you can't see reality with a capital R, so to speak.
Exactly.
That's what we experience, when we go to the church, when we went yesterday, and you get into that big reality experience, it's like automatically kind of cleanses the filters for a little while and opens the heart and clears the mind and settles down that body, the body stuff trying to do something. So
right. That's exactly it. And the other thing I just want to mention that I know we don't have, I could go on, as you well know, for hours about this, as I have just done. So anyway, the other big thing that's different about the Enneagram than other typologies that have been on the market for a long time is that it goes to your motivation, not your behavior. Why you do what you do, not just that, you like to have your office clean. It's why. What's going on about that? And furthermore, it gives you all sorts of activities and ways to shift that and ultimately get into the spiritual essence that's underneath all of it.
Yeah. So could you tell us the motivations? I know that's a big topic, but could you kind of briefly touch on the 9 motivations so we can kind of get an idea of like, oh, okay, now I see.
Well, I can go over those, and I would say that the underlying motivation for all of these is a universal need to be loved and have all our needs met. And so that's underneath everything. And then there's specific ways that the motivation gets exaggerated. So for the 1, it's to be perfect. If I'm perfect, then I'll be loved. For the 2, it's I've got to help others. I've got to be in service all the time. And if I help others, then I'll be loved. For the 3, it's I've got to perform. I've got to be efficient. I've got to get out there because approval is everything. And then I'll be loved. And for the 4, it's like I've got to be unique, but I also want to belong. I want to be unique. I want to belong. Other people have got things I don't have. Oh, dear, what shall I do? And so there's a back and forth, a push-pull with the 4 about what I have to do. I have to be special and unique, or I won't be seen and heard. For the 5, it's like, oh, no, I'm going to be back here. I'm going to observe. Thank you. I'll just sit back here and watch. I'm going to figure out what it's going to take for me to be safe. So if I do that, I'm going to make sure I carefully monitor my time, energy, and resources, because those are such important, time, energy, and money, which are the resources that I have. And that way I will be safe and I'll have enough, because the universe is always asking more of me than what I want to give. And I need to be safe. And that's the way I'll feel loved. And for the 7, it's like, oh, I've got to get out there and do more, because the 7 is staying away from pain. It can be physical or emotional, their own or somebody else's. And so there's a lot of activity about going out and doing and traveling and having fun. It looks so good, and it is fun, but the motivation is kind of a gluttony for more experiences. And the 8 is like, I got to be in power and control, because there's a lot of people out there that just are not doing the thing they're supposed to, because their innocence is their essence. And I've got to protect my innocence down here, because if anybody knows how real vulnerable and innocent I am, it could be dangerous. So I'm going to make sure nobody would ever guess that. I'm going to have big energy, going to usually be loud, going to make sure that I go out there and protect myself. And the 9 is between the 1 and the 8. And the 9 is kind of back and forth and just says, I hate conflict. I just want to have harmony. Just give me harmony, please. I'll be the mediator, because if there's anything that comes up, I don't like that. So the motivation is to stay safe and stay out of any potential conflict that could occur.
Awesome. And what about the 6s? I didn't hear the 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss the 6s? The 6s are the ones who have a lot of and we all have anxiety. We all have fear. The 6 is about being safe too. So they use their anger and their fear come to get together to protect them. again, and it's all about the protection of the little parts inside that would be afraid. Fear.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
That's, well, I have a little bit of insight into this, so it's not new news to me, but it's so good to hear that. And what a succinct way of you explained it, so we all really get an understanding of how where we might fit into that beautiful Enneagram, and learning about our motivations can be extremely insightful.
I would encourage people, if they're interested, they can go to my website. I would discourage them from taking tests. There are a number, if you're writing this down, saying, what is this again? I want to do, there's tests online of all kinds. And, I'm from the school of thought where I believe in the narrative tradition. I believe in you're the leading expert about you, and you must find yourself. However, you can get a typing interview from practitioners that are like Ali, who are learning to do this perfectly. And so, and she's in the training. So I've got a number of people who would be glad to give you a typing interview for free, because that's part of their learning. And even she won't tell you who you are, but out of these 9 types, by a series of questions, a deepening questions, you then have a personal growth opportunity to find maybe out of the 9 types, she would give you 2 or 3. I think you should investigate these first. And then there's material. And as I said, I've got material on my website, and you can look at, there's a lot of material, podcasts, and all sorts of things on that I would recommend if you to watch, but I don't do a test. If you take a test, that's about behavior. It's not about internal motivation, and it may lead you down a garden path.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I did ask you if you would grace us with a spiritual practice, and I know we're leading up to the end of the show. Would you give us a little spiritual practice?
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you in a spiritual practice that I use for myself, and I use it with my clients, that dovetails with the Enneagram. So I'd like you to just close your eyes for a second and take a couple of slow, deep breaths. Inhaling through your nose, and exhaling out your mouth. Just feeling yourself relax. And if you've never done this before, it's helpful to close your eyes. But if you are someone who's uncomfortable with that, you can just focus your eyes on something stable in front of you. And first thing to notice your shoulders, your back, any part of you that's tense. We often are much more tense than we think we are. Just listening to new material can make you tense. So breathe deeply, again, in through your nose. And then I'd like you to imagine you could just slide your awareness from behind your eyes, slide it down. Just let it go down into your body and rest somewhere between your heart and your belly and your solar plexus. Just feel the gentle rise and fall of your breath. And now I'd like you to imagine that you're walking down a beautiful path in a forest. It's light, and it's a wide path, and it's safe, and it's beautiful. So feel your feet on the ground as you walk. Notice the colors, the scent. See if you can see the sky. Are the trees short or are they tall? And just enjoy this time being by yourself. And you hear a little sound, and it's water. There's a little creek nearby, but you can't quite see it. And then you turn a corner, and now you can see it. You can see the water, and it comes right up to the bank very easily. And it's so beautiful that you think about putting your feet in the water. But you look out, and right in the middle of the creek, there's some sort of inner disturbance, and it's bubbling and it's moving. And in fact, the water is splashing up on the shore. And then you realize, no, I don't want to get in there. I don't want to do that. So you just look at it, just focus on that disturbance. You don't know what it is. And just focus on it. And then it gets very, very little by little quieter, settles down, and is still again. And it's safe. So take your shoes off and put your feet in the water. Feel the cold. Wiggle your toes. And feel what it's like to see the flow of the river, which is equal to the flow of the life. And now as you, for today, step back out, put your shoes back on, automatically drying your feet, and walk more relaxed, more quietly, walking back down the path. By dropping out of your head, you have centered and quieted your head center. By quelling the water that was bubbling up, unconsciously, you have centered and quieted your heart center. And by putting your feet in the water and feeling that coolness on your feet, you have quieted your body center. And as I count back, you come back relaxed and centered. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And opening your eyes, taking another clearing breath and being back in the present.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well, Linda, thank you so much. This has been really eye-opening. I know I'm excited to share you with my audience here, and I hope that we can have you back. Maybe you can talk a little bit more on how you do a typing and how you figure out how you understand your type a little bit better. And thank you so much.
You're welcome, Allie. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. This has been Growing Edge Live with New Thought Media Network, sponsored by Satya. Next week, we'll have Reverend Dr. Jerry Troyer, the president of the affiliated New Thought Network, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.